Well, let's follow up on the findings of the new report on mercury poisoning and its lasting effect at Grassy Narrows with my next two guests, Dr. Donna Mergler, the lead author of the report, and Grassy Narrows Chief Rudy Turtle. Good to see you both. Thanks for coming to speak with me, and you've come to Ottawa today to make your case for more action and to define the problem for us as it continues in Grassy Narrows. Dr. Mergler, let me start with you. This was a report that focused on the youth in Grassy Narrows and how mercury poisoning continues to affect the way young people live there, and it's beyond that. It's young women as well and mothers. We know that. Tell me what you found when you studied these children. What are you seeing?
Okay, we originally did not think that we would be seeing any effects because, as you know, the dumping of mercury was almost 50 years ago, and mercury levels have gone down, but they've remained stable for the last at least 25 years. And nobody thought that it was still having an effect. And we did look at we did a study of the children and youth and looked at their health with respect to mothers' fish consumption during pregnancy. And fish consumption during pregnancy is an indicator of prenatal mercury exposure. So mercury exposure in the womb when the brain and all the other organs are forming.
Right. So what did you find? What are you seeing in these young people in Grassy Narrows?
What we found was that there were very clear associations, taking into account all of the other factors that we know that will affect children's development, between fish consumption during pregnancy and children's poor health, and many of the things that we know are associated with mercury poisoning, such as learning disability, cognitive deficits, and overall conditions that may impact school performance. But I think the most important, to my mind, was this a very, very strong, what we call dose relation. That is, the more fish that the mother ate, the more the children have emotional or behavioral problems.
Okay. A lot of people watching, Chief Turtle, will say there's a problem in Grassy Narrows. The people know about it, and why is there still a consumption of fish? That's a question people would have. Why does, if we know about the problem, and maybe that's part of the issue, why is that poison fish still being consumed?
Well, first of all, like our people are poor. The income level is one of the lowest levels in Canada, and there's very few jobs in the community. So that's one of the reasons they have to eat fish, because it's part of their diet to sustain themselves. In addition, it's something that's been a part of their lives for centuries. Like, you can't just stop something that they've been doing it for hundreds of years.
May I add
Yes,
something
Doctor.
to that? Is that the fish consumption at which we began to see effects is under the Canadian guidelines for walleye from that region.
Right. So people are following the rules effectively.
We're not talking about the high levels of mercury exposure that we saw that were existing in the 70s. These are much lower levels, and these levels are still having effects.
Wow. For how long? I mean, where does this story end for the people of Grassy Narrows?
The story is going to end when, one, there's remediation and the river gets back to normal, and two, when the people have been adequately compensated for what has happened to them, and that there is adequate schooling or adequate support for the schools. The teachers work very hard, the principal works very hard, the students work very hard, but there is the deficit caused by mercury, and they need more resources.
Chief Turtle, you made the point today. You talked about compensation. There is some compensation now for some residents. The federal government has apparently committed to develop to fund a Mercury treatment center at some point. But you made the case today that when you looked at the response to the plant closing and the planned plant closing in Oshawa, and then you look at the response to your community, what do you see?
Well, you can clearly see the injustice. Like the Prime Minister acts very quickly when we're talking about that factory at Oshawa. Like his response is very quick, and yet this thing has been going on for 50 years, and it's funny that the response is so slow, and we have to resort to protesting and stuff like that just to get our message to him. And we shouldn't have to be doing that. This is a message that's been there for decades now.
Dr. Mergler, you talked about the remediation of the river. Is it a fixable problem?
According to the environmental scientists, absolutely. There was a report in 1985 that with indications of how the river can be remediated by the same scientist who is working on it today.
You made recommendations today, learning center to educate residents about the dangers of mercury poisoning, and the creation of emergency and long-term programs for children and youth focused on crisis counseling and improved medical and neuropsychological assessment and therapy. What does that entail in terms of, again, is that, I mean, people look at these things through the lens of costing, and is that a lot of money, and should that even matter?
I don't think it should matter at this point. I think that collectively, because it's through our governments, that we've allowed this situation to exist, so that we should not be talking about money. We should be talking about needs. And the needs of this community, when we talk about a learning center, a place where people will learn about the history of what happened, not only the people of Grassy Narrows, but all of the professionals that come to work with them, the teachers, the school administration, the physicians who don't know very much about what happened in Grassy Narrows and why the people have the illnesses that they have. They need to have evaluation, neuropsychological, because mercury is a neurotoxic,
right,
so that it affects the brain.
And as I understand it, and it works and it demonstrates symptoms in various stages.
Yes, right. And at the beginning, you don't even see the effects. You have a loss of learning capacity, a loss of cognitive ability, a loss of attention span. So that is important. But these things, the brain is plastic. We can learn, if we know what's wrong, we can train people in such a way that it can be overcome.
Chief Turtle, let me give the final word to you here. What's your message to the Prime Minister?
My message to the Prime Minister is to take this issue seriously, and to take this issue and make it a priority, because this has gone far too long. It's been a long 50 years. Our people are suffering, our children are suffering, and we need to get our economy back. Having no economy for 50 years is not fair, and it's all because of this pollution. And in addition, we would like our children to have proper funding so that they could have proper education and develop themselves and become self-sufficient people. So I'm asking Mr. Trudeau and to hear what we're saying, and to meet us. I've been, like I mentioned in previous interviews, I've written a letter to him before, a letter of invitation to come to our community. My predecessor, Chief Simon Fulbisher, wrote a letter to him, and every time we get the same response. And that,
I mean, you're a community that's been dealing with this problem for a long time, so you must have built within you a fairly high reserve of hope. So we'll see what happens with your latest appeals this time.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.